Well, today we do start a new sermon series. It is called A Time for Everything. And it is based on the verses we read, the 3rd chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard that passage before. It gets used a lot at funerals, for example. But you know, a lot of times we don't really think about the things that it says very much. The author of Ecclesiastes says that there is a time for everything. And that includes some pretty unpleasant stuff. War, hatred, tears, death. Now we know those things exist, so in that sense we know that there is a time for everything. But why? Why is there a time for those things? And you know, that's not all that the author of Ecclesiastes says. He goes on to say that God has made everything beautiful in its time. Really? I mean, we know those things exist, but how in the world can some of those things be beautiful? So that's what we're going to talk about in this sermon series, and we're going to start out with one of the things that may be the hardest to understand. Ecclesiastes says that there is a time for love and a time for hate. And both of those are among the things that God has made beautiful in their time. Now, it's pretty easy for us to understand how there can be a time for love. After all, we talked during Holy Week about how Jesus gave the disciples the new commandment that they love one another. Jesus said the 2 greatest commandments are that we love God and love our neighbor. Seems like it should always be the right time to love. And of course, we say all the time that God is love. And because God is love, we can understand how love can be beautiful. But what about hate? How can there be a time for hate? And how can hate be beautiful? And that's why we read the passage from Luke. Now listen to this again. Jesus says, "Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man." Jesus says we are blessed when people hate us. We are blessed when people exclude us and insult us. So, if the hatred of others leads to blessings for us, then apparently there must be an appropriate time for that hatred. There is a time for hate. If that hate turns into blessings, then I guess in a way that kind of makes the hate beautiful. But here's the thing. The hatred of others can lead to God's blessings toward us, but not always. We're only blessed by the hatred of others when that hatred comes because of the Son of Man. We have nothing to fear from the hatred of others as long as that hatred comes as a result of us living the way that Jesus told us to live and doing the things Jesus told us to do. If we do the things Jesus told us to do, if we live the way Jesus told us to live, if we really do that, there probably are going to be some people who hate us. Now that can be true on a global scale, but it can be true on a local scale here too. You know, if we really live in accordance with our Christian principles, if we really live the way Jesus told us to live, we're going to stand out from the crowd. We are going to be different. And you know, that's not easy. It's not easy to be different. We have a tendency to want to be a part of things. We want to be a part of the group. Not easy to be different. And there are going to be people who do not like us when we're different. It's not easy to be the one who says no when everyone else is saying yes. Or the one who says yes when everyone else is saying no. You know, we talk about peer pressure for young people, and it certainly is a problem that young people deal with, but it's not just young people who deal with peer pressure. Each one of us deals with it. We deal with peer pressure all throughout our lives. And I suspect that pretty much all of us here can think of times where we went along with something, went along with the group, even though what the group wanted to do was not really what we thought was right. I suspect each one of us here has done something that we wish we had not done, or has not done something that we wish we had done because we were afraid of what other people would think of us. We're afraid that other people might think we're weird or strange. Maybe we don't think of that as hatred, but we are afraid people will not like us if we don't go along. And so We go along to get along. And it's understandable because I don't know anyone who really enjoys being disliked. I cannot imagine that anyone anywhere would enjoy being hated. But Jesus says that you and I need to be willing to risk that. We need to risk being disliked or even hated because of our belief in him. Jesus said we will be blessed if we're hated and excluded and insulted and rejected because of him. If we're willing to risk those things, we will receive God's blessings. So, as often happens, you and I have to make a choice. And it's going to happen repeatedly throughout our lives that we have to make that choice. We have to choose, basically, whether we want to receive the blessings of the people around us, the blessings of the world, or whether we want to receive God's blessings. Because nowhere in the Bible does it tell us that we'll be blessed if we go along to get along. You cannot find that anywhere. Jesus never did that himself. He could have. Would have made his life on earth a whole lot easier if he'd have just gone along with a few things, tried to get along with the Pharisees, that sort of thing. But he never did that. And Jesus never told us to do it either. Now understand, that does not mean we're supposed to walk around looking for trouble. Jesus did not tell us to do things with the goal of having people hate us for them. Jesus did not have a goal of having people hate him. Jesus knew that some people inevitably would hate him for the things that he did, for the things that he said. And he was willing to risk that in order to do what God wanted him to do. And if you and I claim to follow Jesus, then we need to be willing to risk it too. And Jesus tells us that if people do hate us because we're following him, that's okay. In fact, Jesus says it's more than okay. Jesus tells us to rejoice in that. Jesus tells us to leap for joy because of that. Nothing to worry about. Jesus says, hey, that's how people treated all the prophets too. Of course, it's also how people treated Jesus himself. He says we don't need to worry about that hatred because when people hate us because of our faith in Jesus, we will receive our reward in heaven. But it's still a tough thing. I don't like it when someone does not like me, much less when someone hates me. Again, I don't know anybody who does like that. But we need to be willing to accept it. And that acceptance really comes in two ways. We talked about the first, being willing to risk being hated. But there's another way we need to accept this too, and that is that we need to accept it by not responding in the same way. That's what Jesus tells us later in the reading. Jesus tells us, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. In other words, Jesus is telling us that while there is a time for hate, there is also a time for love. And that's a tough thing too, because it is not easy to love somebody who hates us. It's just not. Not easy to love people who exclude us, to love people who insult us. It's not easy to love people who reject us. It's a very hard thing, not our natural reaction at all. Our natural reaction is to fight back. You insult me, I insult you. You're mean to me, I'm mean to you. We tend to treat each other the way we get treated. But that's not what Jesus said. Jesus did not say we should treat others as others treat us. Jesus said we should treat others the way we would like others to treat us. In other words, we need to treat people well no matter how they treat us. And we need to love people, even when they hate us. And Jesus, as usual, gave us the example. We just went through Holy Week. We just went through Easter. Think of what Jesus said while he was hanging on the cross. And Jesus was hated. Jesus was excluded. Jesus was insulted. Jesus was rejected. People did to Jesus everything that he was talking about in this set of Bible verses and more besides. And how did Jesus respond? He loved them. He blessed them. He prayed for them. Jesus pleaded with God on the behalf of the people who were killing him. Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. We've heard that so many times that we kind of take it for granted. We say, well, that's just Jesus being Jesus, you know, that's Jesus doing what Jesus is supposed to do. And it is. That does not mean it was easy for him. That does not mean it was his natural reaction. Jesus, while he was on earth, was fully human as well as fully divine. I'm sure there was a part of him that did not want at all to love those people who hated him. But he did it. He did the hard thing. Jesus overcame that part of him that wanted to respond to these people in kind, that wanted to treat them the way they were treating him. Jesus had enough love to accept what was done to him. Jesus had enough love to love those people anyway. And that's what you and I are supposed to do too. There is a time for hate. There's not a time for us to hate. There's a time for hate because we live our lives the way Jesus told us to. And when we do that, not everyone's going to be happy about it. But there's also a time for love. When we respond to hate with love, even that hate becomes beautiful. Because then we receive blessings from God. Amen.